Well, good evening, everyone. Happy Wednesday, or actually Tuesday evening when we're actually recording this. My name is William Marsh. I'm the Director of Clinical Education here at Premier Research Labs, and I'm so excited to welcome you live to our final webinar for our Hormonal Month, where we'll be actually exploring the concepts of Yin and Yang as it could be integrated into hormonal duality and really hormonal protocols with your clients. I'm so excited that you're joining us live. If this is at a recorded session, you're maybe watching this at a later date. Thank you for tuning in. It is truly my pleasure and really my passion to share information and insights on how you can better enrich your clinical approach with your practice or with your clients. Please note, I'm more of a researcher. I've been working with practitioners for close to a decade, helping them navigate, implement Premier Research Labs products in their practice. And so my goal in really tonight's education and tonight's webinar is to maybe provide you a new lens to operate your practice through. We're going to be incorporating language from a traditional Chinese medicine kind of lens or viewpoint. And really my goal is to help you maybe approach your clients with a different mindset, kind of getting out of the more Western paradigm of healing and really trying to incorporate the Eastern paradigms in a language that really can be more encompassing and more friendly to really kind of complete the picture of your client's health paradigm. And so do know that we'll be going through and introducing the concepts of Yin and Yang, but my goal really with tonight's webinar is to help you leave with a new definition and maybe a new approach of how you can approach hormonal health with your clients through the lens of Yin and Yang. So let me actually, before I even bring my slides onto screen here, I do know that I actually started a poll. So if you have some time while you're listening in to this webinar, please feel free to reply to that poll. Would love to get to those results at the end of the webinar. And do know that I would love to get to any questions that you have. So because we are live, I love Q&A. This is probably one of my favorite parts of our webinars is just going through the Q&A section, and would love to get to as many as I can. So post those while I dive into the lecture. I'll come up for air and get to as many as I can at the conclusion of tonight's webinar. And if you have thoughts, comments, please feel free to post those as well. This is really an interactive session for us as premier practitioners to come together and really talk hormones, as this is kind of the ending segment to our Hormonal Harmony Month here. But do know hormones are so important, right? As we know, they're the orchestrators of all of really life's pivotal processes. And so we will be talking, I'm sure, again, on a different lecture around them. So, and if you have suggestions, if you have comments, you can always reach out to myself at wmarsh@prlabs.com. Also, if you yourself would like to participate in a webinar or a podcast here at Premier Research Labs, please feel free to reach out too. Our goal is to really unite our practitioner community and really support enlightenment across all modalities with different thoughts, approaches, and really create a unification of ideologies so that we can really better all of our clients to ideal health. So with that being said, let me pull up my slides here so we can dive in. And then let's get these to the present. Awesome. Sorry, the square. That's right. It reminded me that I have a square that I always have to minimize, so that is off as well. So tonight's webinar again is on hormonal duality, rooting the yin and yang in hormonal health. And really, actually, I wanted to start with a little bit of a story before we get into the lecture tonight. And this really, I think, illustrates yin and yang perfectly. And it's more of actually what happened when I was driving in to do this webinar. There was actually a rainbow as I was driving in. And basically it rained here in Austin, and there was a rainbow that I witnessed as I was coming in. And, I thought there for a moment, like, what could this mean? I always like to kind of look at the world around me and what clues that the world might be telling me. And, I was thinking there for a second, and, the concept of yin and yang in a lot of ways is about finding perfect balance, right? And I think, when you start to incorporate a philosophical view of health where yin and yang are kind of at the mind's eye of how you're balancing the aspects of health, you really can kind of be in that perfect place to see the rainbow in life. And so, I think all of us as practitioners, taking that adage and being willing to, really kind of center ourselves so that we can be open to really the magic that, our clients, they're coming in and normally they're out of balance, right? So many clients, they're either on the yin side or the yang side of health. And what we're trying to do is bring products, bring lifestyle suggestions, bring a totality of kind of changes in their life so that they can find that perfect balance so they themselves can actually see the rainbow in each of their lives. So know that what we're trying to do is be in the perfect viewpoint and really balance inputs of hormonal health so that you have that perfect equilibrium and balance. Do know that tonight's webinar, this is for educational purposes only. The information that I will be sharing, and I will be going into some products tonight, is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical disease. As always, make sure if you're working with a client that you are working with their primary healthcare provider if you themselves are not. But the products that we will be discussing are for qualified health professionals working with Premier Research Labs directly. And please know that the statements that will be made this evening have not been evaluated by the FDA. But what we're looking to do with this philosophy of Yin and Yang is really bridge endocrinology with traditional Chinese medicine. And really the endocrine puzzle, as we kind of see it as practitioners in a lot of ways, is that hormones are biochemical messengers, right? That regulate our physiology, and they work on a lot of different aspects of health. But in a lot of ways, practitioners, and especially if you've grown up in kind of the Western lens of medicine, is you kind of view those endocrine messengers in isolation, right? You're maybe looking at cortisol, and then you're looking at androgens, and you're looking at estrogens, and then you may be looking at the thyroid system as well. But with an integration of Eastern kind of philosophy, what we're looking to do is that there's a complementary balancing effect that we're really trying to elicit with Yin and Yang that really allows a duality in how hormones are expressing. Yin really representing the cooling, the nourishing, the receptive qualities of the body, whereas Yang is embodying the active, the warming, and the transformational energies. And what we're looking to do as practitioners is allow that perfect expression of both Yin and Yang in the client to really support a framework and a harmonic effect in the body that really allows and empowers ideal expression within that client. And so, keep in mind that when we're talking about Yin and Yang, we're talking about that dynamic duality where hormonals are working in equilibrium to support a ideal harmonic state. And there is nothing that is working in isolation. And this is really taking that Western medical view and really integrating this aspect where everything is working cohesively together. As we know, that's how the body operates, right? But characteristics of Yin, and if you're looking to kind of more so quantify Yin levels with the client, it would be understanding, aspects of kind of that restful, cooling, fluid state of the body, whereas Yang is more activity, heat, and energy. And keep in mind, when we're looking at Yin and Yang, this is something that isn't always in constant flux. We'll talk about some examples here that illustrate this perfectly, but nothing is going to be perfectly, just Yin and Yang, perfectly in balance at any given time, because it's always shifting. And keep in mind, the beauty of Yin and Yang is there's always a little Yang and Yin, and there's always a little Yin and Yang. And so, keeping the body's always kind of moving and trying to find that equilibrium. And that is really the homeostatic process of the body, right? There's always this constant flux, and it's this really artful balancing act that we as practitioners are looking to support the physiological system of the body and maintaining. And so, Yin energy, when we're conceptualizing that, the key language that's brought up most frequently is cooling, moistening, nourishing qualities, right? It's a little bit more of a feminine expression, and it is a little bit more of the inner aspects of life. And this corresponds to the body's fluids, the blood, and the tissue. Whereas Yang energy, this is the activation, the energizing, more the masculine aspects of life, where this typically manifests in expression as metabolism, motion, and excitation. And as you can kind of probably already see, there is correlations to very specific processes within endocrinology where you have more Yin energy and you would have more Yang energy. And so the biochemical view of hormones, right, is there is an imbalance that is typically measured by high and low expression of certain hormonal metabolites that are in circulation of the body. Whereas in the energetic view, when we start to incorporate Yin and Yang language into the body, it's the expression of each individual organ gland system and how the Yin and Yang aspects of that hormonal or organ gland system are operating. And this means that, there is, the liver, for example, you could have more Yang, or you could have more Yin expression, even though it may be more of a Yin type organ, right? And what we're doing and what we're looking to understand is how, from a supplemental standpoint, we can work to maybe tweak the balance so that we are better supporting overall harmony with yin and yang expression globally. And so as practitioners, and we'll get to at the very end a wonderful way of perhaps framing questions, because you will be doing functional labs most likely, right? You'll be looking at the biochemical view, but the energetic and the expression of how that client is perceiving those levels, I think, is so important, because a lot of times that better cues you from an energetic standpoint what products and what lifestyle suggestions may be more beneficial to really support hormonal harmony with that client. And so, the modern overview from an endocrinology standpoint is that you have a key hormonal network within the hypothalamus, the pituitary, that really works to support the thyroid, the adrenals, and the gonads. And we're really big here at Premier Research Labs in really making sure that the HPA axis is ideally nourished, given that this is, the HPA axis is really the master and governing network for the entire hormonal system. And so when we're looking at really helping to manifest and support balance within yin and yang in the body, a lot of times, and especially in today's society, we're working to optimize cortisol. Of course, there is aspects to the cardiometabolic environment of the body. So insulin management is going to be critical, understanding markers of inflammation, and then, of course, looking at the thyroid itself and making sure that that's well nourished to support ideal metabolic rate overall is going to be very important. But through this kind of lens or modern approach to hormonal health, there is this understanding that hormone secretion does follow a natural cycle, and there is circadian rhythm around how you should have ideal expression with cortisol. And of course, hormones, males and females are vastly different, right? As we know, females have a monthly cycle. Males, typically it's more of a daily cycle in terms of hormonal management, but there is still key aspects of yin and yang balancing in the body. And so, when we're looking at yin, a lot of times this is the anabolic activity of the body. So like, hormones involved with storing and building tissue typically are aligned more with yin qualities. Estrogen is an exemplification of that, right? Where you actually have the building of the uterine lining, right, to actually prepare for perhaps fertilization, implantation, and reproduction. But there is, yang aspects of hormones where cortisol is, going to be a predominantly measured hormone and looked at, because there is that fight or flight response, which essentially is yang. Now, androgens are a little bit different, as they do tend to actually have both a yin and a yang aspect. There's a mobilization with androgens, but there also is an aspect of muscle building, right? So keep in mind that some hormones do have more of a dual nature in how we're classifying them through a yin and yang lens, where progesterone, for example, does actually support gestation, right? Prepares the body and works through pregnancy, but it does have this activation energy where you're raising the core body temperature, right? So, that's another example, along with DHEA, where you have adrenal vitality, right? Yang activation, but it is also works to support overall sex hormone balance in the body as well. And so mapping key hormones to yin and yang, really, yin's going to be that nourishing fluid, whereas yang is going to be that activation, that fire. Cortisol being the primary yang hormonal analog. You do have adrenal, adrenaline, epinephrine, both can kind of create those acute spikes of yang energy in the body. Thyroid hormone as well would be another yang example in terms of the hormonal network, whereas when we're looking at yin, we've talked about estrogen, but melatonin is another product, right, that it really supports the yin aspects of the body, as well as insulin, being that it does support the storing and reservation of energy for mobilization by yang hormones, right? And we've talked about, bridging examples, progesterone, of course, another one, testosterone, but both of those have aspects where they do mobilize and they do build. So keep in mind, it's not necessarily just black and white, even with hormones in that sense. But the cool thing is, and this is where modern science is aligning, and of course we as practitioners have this acute awareness, not only can hormones be classified through this lens of how they impact yin and yang balance in the body, but there's this hormonal rhythm throughout the day and the natural tendency for how we can support alignment with the yin and yang balance throughout the day. And keep in mind, as we're waking for a day, right, this is where we typically have an increase of yang energy where, cortisol's peaking. That's really allowing the body to wake up. And then you have really this preparation for the day's activities with that initial spike of yang energy, right, to get you mobilized and get you out of bed. And so, we may want to keep in mind that with that natural yang activation, that sometimes that can be overactivated, right? And especially in today's society where most people, I would say, are kind of in more of a yang state, we really want to make sure that we're complementing and supporting ideal state nutrition with that kind of overactivation of yang so that the body can hopefully find yin in the evening more readily. I think this is where, a lot of clients, and even if I've struggled this with myself, we're typically by 7 p.m., 8 p.m., we're still kind of in that go, go, go activation phase, and we're not really settling down and getting ready to, really support repair and restoration through deep restorative sleep. And so, keep in mind that, when we talk about building protocols and really supporting ideal hormonal health with clients, a lot of times it is aligning with the natural hormonal rhythms, which really are predetermined by these natural yin and yang cycles in the body. And so, of course, from we've talked about the classification, right, from, the hormonal axis, but you can kind of take yin and yang classifications by system. And so within the reproductive system, right, you will have hormones that follow within yin and yang in kind of that dual space. Wanted to just make sure we had an outline here. I think it's interesting, neurotransmitters can be classified under the same lens, where dopamine is a great example of a yang neurotransmitter, whereas with yin you have serotonin and oxytocin, right? Those nourishing, cooling, very fluid type hormones that make you feel good, right? Whereas yang does make you feel good as well, but it kind of latches you on and propels you towards action. Within the thyroid axis, right, we look at thyroxine being more of a T4 being more of a yin hormone, whereas T3 would be more of a yang hormone. And then, of course, growth hormone and insulin being more of those dual hormones in regards to a yin and yang classification system. And so, once again, what we're really trying to do is, when we're really taking a philosophical lens with yin and yang balance with our clients, is we're making sure that we have complementary actions. And whenever we are supplementing, right, and we are perhaps making a recommendation around a yang formula, we may want to understand where in the body we may need to further bolster yin. And this is where a lot of times in our hormonal protocols that we're really helping to consult practitioners with, we may implement a yang formulation that supports the adrenal axis, for example. But we do have to keep in mind that with the activation of the adrenals, we may need more minerals, we may need more B vitamins, we may need more yin nourishment to support the activation and the stabilization of that organ gland system with the tonifying herbs and botanicals that are included in that product. So, for example, if I'm making a recommendation around Adrenaven, I typically like to recommend for practitioners that they're looking at our pH minerals product, they're looking at our max BND product, even omega-3s. Those are all very nourishing, micronutrients that really support and stabilize the yang activation that comes with a product like Adrenaven, right? And so it kind of makes sense. A lot of us probably on this call do this intuitively already, but we might not be actually using and framing our lens of how we're approaching our clients' health through yin and yang, and you're doing it already. So it's really exciting, right? You're doing it without even knowing you're doing it. And so, we really want, I think the key and the gem and the insight, right, and what we're trying to understand, and once again, at the end of this webinar, we'll get into some framing questions, and I think language is such a great way to really better understand what a client is feeling. But a lot of times what we're trying to do is understand where there is excess patterns, right? And so, yang excess in a lot of times is characterized through hyperactivity. You could have hyperthyroidism, for example. You could have a hypermobilization of the adrenals and the HPA axis. But that metabolic fire is essentially overwhelming the cooling aspects of the body. And I think when we think about drivers of chronic disease, especially if there is, for example, is a chronic infection, there can be this overexcitation and just inflammation in the body that is really utilizing and causing the overconsumption of key resources that other parts of the body don't have access to because of that chronic infection or because of that chronic overexcitation. And so incorporating yin products actually can really shift the body to quell and kind of calm that fire, and the body can actually reestablish homeostasis. Whereas yin, this is where you might have estrogen dominance, for example, but it typically is characterized by stagnation, sluggishness. Symptomologies can include weight gain, cystic formation, heavy menstrual flowing, right? The body is essentially overwhelmed and overburdened with whether that's physiological stress or emotional stress, and it's basically having this hyper storage effect that's kind of permeating the body, which leads to this stagnation and accumulation. And I think just as bad, right, and detrimental as yang excess, because what that causes is disease and dysfunction and decay through that stagnation. And so what we want to normally with yin excess is work to support tonification and activation with yang supplementation. And some examples, right, is you can actually have liver stagnation. Non-alcoholic fatty liver may be a kind of state that is more characterized by yin excess, for example. You also do have polycystic ovarian syndrome as well. Somebody that has heavy menstrual cycles, that's perhaps a characterization of yin excess. And so, a lot of times this is where, not only from a supplemental angle for an entire month's period, but actually looking hour by hour, you can really start to personalize protocols to understand from where in a client's lifestyle there is perhaps yang excess and yin excess. That could be a choice of actually what they choose to eat for food. That could be a lifestyle choice that they're making. It could be the environment that is stimulating these yin and yang excess patterns in their body. And so what we as practitioners may want to do is, really consult them around how they can change those behaviors and those patterns so that we can really support and manifest balance with that client. And so what I'll actually go through now is really talking about some key examples, right, from a clinical angle of how yin and yang can manifest and how you can have this, perhaps this miscommunication and dysregulation through key aspects of the body. But really what yin and yang start to manifest, right, when you have these patterns that, are habitually ingrained time and time again, is it starts to disrupt, communication intracellularly. And a lot of times the beautiful thing about supplementation is you're perhaps providing nourishment, herbals, and botanicals that can correct how the body is perceiving those signals. And a lot of times with hormones, right, it's not that the body's not secreting hormones, right? The body still is actually maybe secreting insulin, but perhaps because of the indulgence that the client may be engaged in, the body is starting to ignore that insulin signaling. So the insulin's knocking on the door of the cell, right? And the body's like, oh, well, we're not going to respond. And we can get into the biochemical reason of why that's happening. But, a lot of times what we can actually do to foster a reconnection of that key communication pathways in the body is support with, for example, if you're having that overindulgence, which is a yin aspect, well, we can actually incorporate formulas that have yang energy, like our pancreavin, which cinnamon is a more of a yang formulation, causing that activation and the mobilization of blood glucose and actually insulin sensitivity that helps to correct that, right? Sounds very simple, but essentially that's what we're doing in a lot of ways, is we're working to balance yin and yang in the body. And so when applied through the lens of the menstrual cycle, right, you actually have key yin and yang phases throughout the 30-day or 28-day period through menstruation. And so keep in mind the menstrual phase, that is typically you have yin, and then you have more of a yin rising. And then as you get into ovulation, so from the follicular phase to ovulation, that's the yin to yang pivot point. And with ovulation, estrogen tends to peak, which then you're actually going to start to have this free flow of blood and fluid that starts to, from that yang activation, then actually work to form deposition in that menstrual phase, right, with the release of that energy. And it's really important that we can start to actually time nutrients, right, and time supplementation around these different phases. And so, we have a wonderful product called Balance FX, which I'll actually go here to this next slide here. But if you are actually seeing irregular cycles, there may be a delayed yin buildup, for example, where you're actually having basically a deficiency in how the yin is actually building up. And so, perhaps working with a product like Balance, which has chastity in it, can really support the clearance and the movement of that yin, or actually help to support the yin buildup. You can also, with painful periods, a lot of times there is a blood stagnation, right? So there's this aspect where the body actually isn't freely bleeding. And so even in our Balance FX, we incorporate ingredients that really support the blood itself. So not only the chastity in the formulation, but you are also getting Tong Kui, which would actually support the release of the blood and the free flowing of that blood, which actually provides a little bit of yang stimulation as well. So something to kind of keep in mind that, there is that underlying, especially if it's painful periods, because you're not actually free bleeding, the body actually has to cramp really forcefully, right, to have that release. The body may actually need a yang activation with key herbals and botanicals. And then PMS, and a lot of times when we're looking through the lens of TCM, a lot of times it's more so associated with liver qi stagnation. And that causes, because there isn't there's an imbalance of how the body's actually shifting from yin to yang during ovulation. And so I actually love our green tea extract as a potential product to kind of, especially during the follicular phase, moving into ovulation, right? The catechins and the EGCG content too, for example, our green tea extract can better manage if there is a high estrogen dominance, right? That's a simple product with those polyphenols that can really work to support and help the movement of qi throughout the body. When we're looking at low libido and sexual vitality, I think it's really, really important, especially when you take in the perspective of yin to yang, to really take into account the aspect of the kidney. The kidney is really, when you're looking through the lens of TCM, is what provides the spark of performance and desires, actually is the source of willpower as well, energetically. And so, when we are working hormonally, right, there is aspects where, that low libido, that low arousal state actually comes from an aspect of the body not able to effectively balance or actually generate that spark for intimacy, which can come from a kidney deficiency. I mean, if we actually start to think about this from the HPA axis, right, a lot of times when we're have an overexcitation, abundance of cortisol physiologically, it starts to drain the adrenals, which then starts to drain the kidneys, right? Which depletes key minerals, depletes vitamins, perhaps, that the body needs to actually really provide as fuel for that arousal state. And so, of course, there is supplementation with perhaps DHEA and other ingredients like LJ100 that we'll get into that can more so work directly within the hormonal axis. But there is aspects where simply supporting the yin and yang balance within the kidneys and the ability of the body to have that activation within the kidneys can really support and manifest an increase in sexual arousal and vitality. I do always like to encourage, right, we are incorporating lifestyle strategies like Qigong, yoga, working to actually bring intentionality to kind of the arousal states of the body, right? This is a way where the mind and the body can better connect themselves. But of course, nourishing kidney energy might be an aspect that really starts to regenerate that spark energetically within the body. And again, with perimenopause and menopausal symptoms, we do have wonderful formulas like our Radiant Woman and our estroflavone that can really start to help manage whether that's estrogen dominance or low androgens during perimenopause and menopause. But keep in mind that we also should be keeping into account the kidney yin as a aspect of really helping to support the management of perhaps menstrual manifestations energetically that may be present during menopause. And a lot of times you actually find this aspect of kidney yin deficiency where you're no longer having this deposition and this fluidity in the body. And so Renovin's a great product because within the product itself, it provides both yin and yang formulations. And a lot of our Vin formulas are really kind of built, which is beautiful, to really support harmony, right? And I think this is where, really energetically, we've done a lot of work to really, of course, provide the best sourcing, but provide the best nutrient complements where, we are having kind of this dual approach even in our organ gland targeting products. And of course, there's aspects with lifestyle, nutrition, botanicals, supplements, right? I really do like looking from a food aspect, sesame seeds, soy for the phytoestrogens, right? And there is really good soy that tests very, very well energetically. Berries and hydrating foods. It's best to avoid spicy, caffeine, and alcoholic beverages, which, especially during menopause, add unnecessary heat. Keep in mind, we may not want activation within the yang aspects of the body, especially during menopause. So really supporting the yin aspects of the body really can support helping to manage menopausal symptoms from an energetic lens. And of course, within the adaptogenic HPA axis, vitamin D, magnesium, herbs that kind of help to manage the cortisol during that phase are going to be very, very critical as well. So you really can support that hormonal balance through those different secondary attributes. When we're looking at low testosterone in men, from a yin and yang lens, again, typically, and possible causes a lot of times, especially for younger men, right, is insulin resistance or chronic stress, especially if a man is under the age of 30 or 40 and they're seeing low testosterone. Typically, it actually comes from that chronic yang activation in the body, which can be detrimental, right, from the cortisol aspect. And again, you may want to be looking at, because of that kidney yang, it's actually causing that low T deficiency. And so, there may be aspects where you may want to support the Jing essence of the body. And testosterone premium is a great product that may help to kind of re-spark the fires, given how it does have 2 clinically studied ingredients. It has the LJ100, and then it has a testofen extract, which provides those saponins, which we reviewed on our Lunch and Learn last week. But keep in mind that may help to kind of clear the clutter, especially when you have insulin resistance and chronic stress that may not be allowing the testosterone signaling to work efficiently in the body. Those key ingredients in testosterone premium in a lot of ways works to kind of clear out the noise from kind of the metabolic environment or the cortisol environment of the body, so that the free-flowing testosterone that's being produced actually has the greatest level of activation that it can. Of course, I do encourage, right, where you are still working to help to manage weight, reduce alcohol consumption, support resistance training 3 to 4 times a week, right? But all of those, may not be, and like it may not support adoption of lifestyle changes. And this is where a supplement where, somebody starts to use that for a week to 2 weeks, they start to feel that fire come back in them. Well, they might be more willing to adopt strategies that really change those excess patterns of yang that may be causing detriment, right? So something to kind of keep in mind, right? We're trying to create awareness where there's potential detrimental patterns that are causing those improper outcomes with clients. Andropause, right? This is a little different than just low T for like 30 to 40-year-old men or to even 20-year-olds. Andropause is where you have that midlife transition. It is natural for males to have a decrease in testosterone as they age. And so, keep in mind that from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, males actually age in around an 8-year cycle. So every 8 years, there's kind of a phase that you're going through. And by the age of 64, there is a large depletion of kidney essence, right? And so that kidney yang and the kidney essence decline over time may be responsible actually for a manifestation energetically of a low T expression later in life. And so incorporating products that may support the yang essence of the kidney and support that Jing essence in the body may really support to help with the correction of andropause or limiting the impact of andropause later in life. One product that I really like to turn to and really create awareness around is our NZ Red Deer Velvet Antler, which is known traditionally as a kidney yang product, right? And it does work to support the Jing essence of the kidney. And so, this is nice because it really can correct the deficiency pattern from, I would say, it could be overindulgence, right, for men, but it is just also the aspect of utilization of that Jing essence from a life well lived, let's just put it that way. And so perhaps incorporating this product actually can kind of build back the reserves of that Jing essence in the kidney and really support a correction of really the hormonal environment of the body. I think it's important to note that, Deer Velvet Antler has different and basically anti-inflammatory prostaglandins and really can help to modify the entire inflammatory kind of environment of the body. There is also collagen that's part of this product, given that it comes and it's naturally sustainably harvested from New Zealand red deer antler. So keep in mind that you're getting a lot of different bioactive compounds that can re-nourish the kidney essence, but also really support the environment of the entire body from an inflammatory state. So don't overlook the deer antler product. I think, especially as long as somebody's not like competing in an athletic event, I think this is a great product, especially if somebody's looking to kind of reignite the fires later in life. I really do encourage the evaluation of this one. And of course, globally, right, there's nutritional strategies, whether, it's for andropause, menopause, low T, you can kind of incorporate key foods that can kind of be more yin or be more yang focused. And there is, of course, kind of chi stagnation energetically where, essentially there's just not enough energy moving through the meridians of the body. And so we may need to support aspects of really helping to bolster the movement of energy of the body through the body. But from a yin angle, keep in mind that we're trying to support the body with, if there's a yin deficiency, right? We want to support the body with foods that are moistening, like black beans, kidney beans, sesame seeds, walnuts. I always do really encourage that you're energetically testing these because there are a lot of potatoes and yams that don't test well, but seaweed and eggs, right? These are all really nourishing foods that really support the yin aspects of the body. Also phytoestrogenic foods, bone broths, organ meats really provide a deeper level of nourishment that really can support a really rebuilding effect of the body. Whereas yang energy or yang foods, we're really looking to incorporate foods that are easily digestible but fuel the metabolic fires. So we talked about bone broths, but adding ginger and cinnamon to the broth, spices that increase the heat of that broth is going to incorporate a yang essence into that food. Lamb and venison, that's another option, but really indulging in spices, garlic, cooked garlic, chives, chili to improve the circulation and warmth of the body. That really is going to help with the movement and the activation. It is recommended, right, to avoid cold foods. That kind of takes away the heat of the body. So if somebody is already finding that they're over kind of in that yin and excess paradigm, well, you may not want to slow the body down with excess foods. And so when we're looking at qi and circulation of qi, there could be a lack of minerals, but it also could be stagnation, right, and improper movement of qi through the body. And so we may want to support detoxification and circulation aspects. And this comes from leafy greens, turmeric, rosemary, citrus fruits, the bioflavonoids, right, that can support lymph activation and really just clearance or a healthy immune system. Of course, these and dietary fibers are going to be really important, right? We really want to create fluidity, but not from a yang aspect. We really want to work, or yin aspect, really want to work from just an overall movement from a detoxification angle. And so, if somebody's finding that the energy is not actually moving through the body effectively, you really want to remove excess dairy, greasy foods, overly sweet foods, which can contribute to a dampness or a stagnation. It's important that yin excess is monitored if there is qi stagnation, because that yin excess is going to cause a further slowing of how the energy is moving throughout the body. And so some symptomologies of qi stagnation, keep in mind we like to look at these through qi systems, right? So emotionally, this can come from bottlenecks, right? So if somebody is emotionally experiencing an inability to express accurately what they're feeling, or move through life in a way that is greatly fulfilling to them, that can be an aspect of chi stagnation, where that energy is pent up, blocked, or unexpressed. And so it's a great cue if you're seeing that on clients coming in and they're expressing these to you in session. Well, that might be a way of maybe incorporating lifestyle habits and food that really create a removal of those blockages. Also, emotionally working with them with products and supplementation strategies like L-theanine or Trinquinol, right? That really helps to create an openness in the body. Keep in mind, when we're working emotionally with a client, a lot of times we want to remind ourselves that it's very important to supplement and really sow the seeds of the emotional work that we're doing. Because a lot of times you're the gardener, you're planting new thoughts in the mind of the client, and we want to really fertilize the field of those new thoughts with supplements that allow that thought and that emotional pattern to blossom, right? And so, working with that from a total global kind of supplement input is really going to support the manifestation, really the correction of those long-term chronic patterns. From a digestive aspect, where you might find chi stagnation, this could be bloating, belching, constipation obviously is an obvious one, but discomfort during actually relieving oneself or actually going to the bathroom, there's typically a blockage, right? There's an inability to actually allow that movement of the food or the food bolus out of the body. And so, keep in mind, we're really, really big here at Premier Research Labs to look at HCl supplementation, look at digestive enzymes, look at fiber supplementation, look at gut microbiome supplementation, where we're really supporting and preventing any stagnation in the digestive tract. We really want to fuel the digestive fires of the body, because, that mobilization of vital energy from the foods that we eat, if we're having any disturbance in how the body's integrating that, well, that really is, over a long period of time or even a short period of time, can cause dysfunction of the body. And so we really want to incorporate and understand where there is potential blockages. So, it's really important, not only you can look at labs, right? We can see, perhaps if there is an inability for the body to digest or assimilate foods from labs, but a lot of times patients, and even as you know yourself personally, they can feel where that stagnation is actually occurring. And so if somebody's feeling that food is sitting in the stomach for a really long time, well, that might be an indication that they're hypochlorite. There's hypochloritic in the stomach, so there's not enough stomach acid. And so supplementing with HCl, which is a great recommendation for really anybody over the age of 30, because you do have a decline in HCl production over time from the stomach, from the parietal cells of the stomach. And so we want to incorporate that, right? And so just looking and understanding and communicating with the client, you can really understand where there may be these points of stagnation. Of course, there's musculoskeletal stagnation from tension in the shoulders, pain. A lot of times we're working to support fluidity in the body with actually supporting with omega-3s. We do have proteolytics like inflammacidin that may help to remove this chi stagnation in the musculoskeletal system, allow the body to heal and kind of support healthy inflammation in the body. Gynecologically, this is where, we've talked about it, but working with our Fembalance FX, our Radiant Woman, even perhaps our estroflavone, those are great products that can kind of help to manage where there may be stagnation. I also do, if there is any hormonal stagnation in the body, we're always looking at the liver and making sure that the liver is moving efficiently. There's nothing better just for global chi movement and vitality than doing a castor oil pack on the liver. So we have a wonderful castor oil that is organic that you can just do a warm compress on the liver, and that's a great way to kind of create that fluidity in that system. With the respiratory system, of course, if you have chest tightening, shallow breathing, heart palpitations, right, for example, we always want to be very cautious cardiovascularly, right? But if somebody is experiencing that, that could be chi stagnation from a cardiometabolic or respiratory kind of standpoint. And so looking at products like our BP complex or our Numavin product, right? I'm looking at Allercaps or N-acetylcysteine, which can actually directly change the composition of mucus in the body. Those are great ways to create fluidity in the respiratory system. And then, of course, within the mental, kind of pairs in line with the emotional body, but an inability to kind of make decisions or have kind of mental brain fog. A product that is great to kind of help with clearing that would maybe something like cognotropic. L-theanine is another great one. Both works to stabilize emotionally, but also help with focusing, right? So those are great, and that's a great new formula to look at. We also have our lion's mane premier, another one if somebody's experiencing mental blocks and we're really supporting kind of an opening of the aperture of the mind, well, we may want to actually look at lion's mane premier to help kind of support new neuronal connections in a heightened state of learning for the brain. Also, both with emotional health and mental health, omega-3s are so very important. And once again, I'll stress, which might be for the 100th time, looking at an omega-3 index, trying to get 3 grams or more of omega-3s in daily is a great way just to really set the stage for healthy cell membranes and really healthy mental or healthy structural aspects to the cognitive system. And then, there is aspects with like overthinkers, repressed emotion. We've kind of talked about that, but there could be kind of this imbalance where, you may be working from a HPA axis perspective, perhaps using adaptogen R3 to kind of help support ideal manifestations from a personality trait standpoint as well. And nutritional tweaks, we've covered a lot of these, but I think it is really important that, we are looking, especially for men with low testosterone, to optimize fat consumption in the body and really include cholesterol sources, as it is a precursor of hormones. Same with women as well. A lot of people overlook the aspect how cholesterol and all hormones in the body are synthesized from cholesterol, and so completely avoiding that from an intake perspective is probably not beneficial, in my opinion. But also for men, looking at pumpkin seeds, saw palmetto berries, maybe looking at our men's performance edge, or even prostaven, right, which does provide saw palmetto in there as well. And then if there is anybody that is experiencing high stress, whether that's male or female, magnesium-rich foods, our supplementation with a magnesium-rich product like our magnesium glycinate is a great way to support adrenal function and overall detoxification, given how magnesium is critical for over 400 different reactions in the body. Whereas when we're looking with women, you can get blood deficiencies, right? One of our great products that is frequently overlooked is our phytoiron premier, which is a non-heme iron naturally sourced from curry leaf extract. This actually is a great gentle iron that isn't actually going to cause stagnation in the digestive tract. So I think it's really important when maybe a client is presenting energetically with blood deficiencies that we actually look to maybe supplement with a product that isn't going to cause stagnation in other aspects of the body. This is where our phytoiron premier is a great product to look at and evaluate. But there also is, for PMS, a lot of times, again, magnesium is a great product to utilize. Also just working to minimize, and perhaps even during that phase, if there is kind of that agitation emotionally, you actually could look at reducing salt consumption and really supporting the liver, right? A lot of times with that aggravation, there is this chi stagnation with the liver. So hepatavin, working with our ginger premier, maybe incorporating niacin, right? That might help to kind of support activation in the liver, which can allow the body to process anything that may be causing kind of that hormonal frustration that may be manifesting. So great ways just to kind of really strengthen overall key aspects within both men and women. And we've talked about adaptogens, the Yin and Yang tonics, right? But kind of working from a more energetic perspective, right? Keep in mind that, this is where we can start to incorporate, whether it's pulse electromagnetic field therapy, light frequencies, Reiki, healing touch. These are ways to directly work to clear any stagnation or clear perhaps imbalances in certain key energetic systems. And I believe it's really exciting to see how science is starting to understand how these long-standing practices, or maybe new standing practices with like PEMF, actually work to support movement of the energetic channels of the body. And so, of course, with any of these devices, obviously Reiki healing touch is a little different, but with light therapies, our pulse electromagnetic field, we do want to make sure that these are utilized in a energetic environment that has been remediated. So, looking at our geosync remediation process, where you actually can apply the geosync to the circuit breaker of the home, are actually working to remediate the smart meter, right, using our geosync Premier. Also, if you have a cell phone near you and you're using any of these devices, right, you want to be in a harmonized field. And so if we can really ground the field of those key areas and allow for ideal frequency kind of impact, right? Because some of these frequencies, if they're in a non-remediated field, they can actually do more damage than actually support, because they're maybe embedding those frequencies directly into the field of the patient. And so really, really important that we're utilizing that. There's also aspects where we do have a matrix pyramid, where if any practitioner is practicing healing touch or Reiki, you can actually charge kind of that healing touch practice by actually kind of being immersion of the hands into the field of the matrix pyramid, where that's going to upregulate kind of the circuitry and the biofield of the practitioner's body. And then when you actually engage in that healing touch, that may be a great way to directly and more impactfully impart kind of that energetic correction, right, that you might be doing as a practitioner. So do know that we offer all of these. And if you're needing consultation or need kind of support on what's the best direction, what's the best product to perhaps support a harmonized field, you can always reach out to education@prlabs.com. We can answer those questions. You can send us pictures of your home, and we can tell you like what products may work best where to really support and correct the field that you may be using some of these frequency-based energy therapies in. So that being said, keep in mind that, globally, right, we really want to really support a dual lens support our diagnosis, right, working kind of to understand both the yin and yang aspects of the body. And really treatment planning helps to really understand, how you're working through those key cycles of yin and yang that manifest naturally. All of our life is a balance of yin and yang, but also the phases of life are yin and yang, right? You typically, as you're younger, right, it's typically more of a yang phase. And then as you get older, there's typically aspects of yin that start to creep in, right? And so, we want to make sure that over the whole life cycle of one's life, or even just the microcycles of one's life, we're understanding how we can incorporate more yin and yang into our life globally. This is where, I really, really encourage as practitioners, maybe start to evaluate how you can incorporate language, right, to really shift the conversation from a more, X's and O's or rational, logic conversation to a more bioenergetic, relational, intuitive conversation. And so you can start to understand using key language that is more appropriate for yin and yang, where there is these energetic excess patterns or there is stagnation. And so, for example, right, if you're looking at thermoregulation of the body, just simply asking the question, do you tend to feel cold or hot throughout the day? If somebody's feeling very cold, that might be that they're not having enough yang energy that's being expressed. And so you can start to think energetically what key systems may be underactive that support yang activity in the body, and how can I supplementally perhaps make recommendations, right? There's another aspect where, does your digestive, or another question that you could simply ask, does your digestion feel sluggish or fast, bloated or empty? That's key language where you can understand where there's perhaps yin or yang indications, where yin may be a weak digestion causing that bloat, or that fluid retention, where you may have a yang deficiency, right? Whereas yang indications may be acid reflux, which sometimes that's more of a actual stagnation in the stomach. So keep in mind that hyperchloridia could be an aspect where there's not enough and it's just actually sitting and fermenting in the stomach. But also there's hunger without appetite or dryness, right? Where there's just, a yin deficiency in the body. Emotional energy, right? Are you more easily drained or agitated emotionally? So are you easily drained or easily agitated emotionally is another great way to kind of understand, are they actually experiencing more yin, where they're fastly kind of having this fluidity or emotional flatness that manifests over time, that may need a little bit of, support from a yang energetic perspective. Are they more irritable, anger, easy to temper, That might be a yin deficiency, which coordinates with excess yin or yang, heat in the liver. And so all these different aspects, and of course we'll share these slides to everybody that registered, but these are great ways to start to, really frame linguistically how you can really better understand your clients. So, having these as part of your intake form, or asking the question when they come in, perhaps they're coming for digestive health, but asking these more qualitative questions around how the patient and where there is kind of how the energy of the patient's manifesting, really can allow you to be more accurate, perhaps with the recommendations that you might be making. And so I really encourage you all to, maybe incorporate a more yin and yang framework with your clients. Look for the rainbows of life, as we started out with our presentation today. And of course, I really want to end tonight's webinar of encouraging you all to practice balance. I mean, if you aren't taking care of your own health, then you're not going to be able to help support balance with your clients. And so maybe asking yourself the question of where you feel stagnation in your life, where you feel yin excess or yang excess. It's a great way as you go through each day to really support patterns and behaviors even when you're with a client, to maybe practice more breathing, or to practice actually how you're creating time for yourself, right? I know life is busy. I know we're all in kind of this yang excess energy, but where can we slow down perhaps and incorporate more yin? Because, that is really important, that you yourself are nourished and really supporting your health systems to really support the health of others. So I encourage you all maybe to take a break, or maybe do some journaling tonight as a reflection of where or how you can better see the rainbows in life with the lecture that we covered today. And I do want to remind you all that this is Hormonal Harmony Month. We have a couple more days, so I know there's about 6 more days actually at the recording of this for our 10% off hormonal health essentials, which we of course covered our Fem Balance. We talked about Radiant Woman, talked about Estraflavone, Men's Performance Edge, right? This is the LJ100, but also Xenostat, right? If you're having an underactivity, perhaps from a kind of a yang expression of the thyroid, well, you may actually want to incorporate Xenostat, right? This is a natural source of plant-based iodine, vegetable iodine, where you can really help to support activity and really flushing of the thyroid, right? Where maybe perhaps there's even stagnation that's repressing the activity of the thyroid. So these are all great formulas that you may want to incorporate as a practitioner to really support hormonal balance with your clients. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. I'm going to minimize the PowerPoint here, and then I'm going to end the poll. But if you do have questions, please feel free to post those in the Q&A. I would love to get to as many as I can with you guys live. And let's see. I'll actually end the poll here. And thank you guys. It looks like we had around 61% of you actually answered. And I'm actually going to end the poll right now. And then I actually will start another reflection. So if you want to, while we do the Q&A, we have a nice little reflection Q&A of what you learned from tonight's webinar. I know it was a little bit more of a perspective shift maybe, but I know I did cover a decent amount of products. So hopefully maybe you learned something new about a product, maybe our red velvet deer antler, which is really, really popular. But let's see here. Just kind of going through the poll that I posed to the audience, we had our first question. If you were to guess, are your clients predominantly needing yin support or yang support? 34% of you actually said yin, which I'm not surprised. About 14% of you said yang, and then about 52% of you, which I love how that is 52% of you, said there was no idea, but I'm excited to learn more. So hopefully you learned a little bit more about yin and yang and what that means from a physiological perspective. The other question that I asked was, how frequently do you support the kidneys with your clients? And I'm excited to report that 44% of you actually said that over 90% of the time it's that important, which I would agree. And then 28% of you said about half the time. And then we had 28% of you as well. So there was a tie, said rarely less than 10%. So hopefully now you understand the importance, given how energetically the kidneys balance the aspects of yin and yang in the body, but they also support the Jing essence of the body, right? And the kind of the activation essence of the body. So, working to perhaps either use Renavin if necessary, or our NZ Red Velvet Deer Antler. Those are great products to work energetically with the kidneys. And then what product would you like to use to support balance with your patients? Let me see, I actually have to get to the survey results here. And we had, it looks like from the answers, adrenal products, Adrenavin, or even our adaptogen, R3, those were the top products for that. And then we did have a couple of you say estraflavone and hepatavin. So great to see you guys actually working through some of our key hormonal products in regards to balancing with your clients. So, and let's see here. It looks like we did have a question. So Jen Hanley, it's great to see you. I hope you're having a great night. There is I believe from the 10%, that is something that it does have, if you're adding those to the cart, it should be automatically taking that off as they do pre-qualify. There is no coupon code for that. So if you do go to prlabs.com and you just place those in your cart, it is automatically 10% off. So it's an easy promotion on that. There isn't any coupon code associated with that. So yeah, it doesn't look like I have any other questions, which from my perspective, hopefully that means I was very thorough in the presentation. But please know, if you do have questions, if you're watching this at a later date and you would like to reach out and clarify any aspect of tonight's webinar, you can email me directly at wmarsh@prlabs.com. Once again, I do want to extend the cordial invitation. If you yourself are a practitioner, you're starting your own podcast, you're actually looking to develop your influence with your network of clients or in your community, and you would like to get your message out, I really do encourage you to reach out. I would love to welcome you on to our Premier Living podcast, or if you have a clinical approach to any of our products that you would love to share with our audience in our Premier Practitioner Network, I would love to see you and welcome you onto a webinar. We have next month actually being our Premier Performance Essentials. My background's actually in yoga. I was a bodybuilder in another life. I also have a background in personal training, so we'll be doing some topics and some Premier product spotlights in regards to athletic performance. So make sure you tune into our content and our Lunch and Learn next month. Also make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter and our email marketing, as we have all sorts of great new educational pieces coming out with each of our emails every week. The goal is actually to provide insights into your inbox. So I'm actually working with our marketing team to give you more information than ever, whether that's blogs or actually product deep dives, or actually working to frame kind of our featured health category of the month through the lens of our 5 pillars of health, or 5 keys to health. So do make sure that you're receiving those emails. If you're not, reach out to your account executive or account manager and team. They'll make sure that you're signed up. And then last but not least, we actually got some set questions, so it's great to see some questions. But Barbara Ordway actually had a question in regards to kidney stones. And a lot of times, energetically, right, it can be both a yin and yang duality, but a lot of times because the body is not actually, there's basically an inability to express, right, that could be characterized by an inability kind of from a yang or an activation signal. And so, you do want to maybe support with herbs that really support exfoliation efficiently. And so, Renavin is a great product. It works both, right? And so I would really recommend evaluating there, perhaps even with an AC. Clinically, if anybody as a practitioner likes to share their insight or would like to share their insights, feel free to as well. But those are some great products I would maybe evaluate as a recommendation. So, and Chaya, it's so great to see you. And then Tiffany as well, thank you so much. If you are, and Tiffany's question was, how do we watch webinars and content at a later date? When you actually log in your professional account at prlabs.com, you can actually go to the education tab or the webinar tab that's on the the left-hand side of your account login screen. It's your little dashboard. There is all of our recorded webinars there. I will say we are working to completely redraft how all of our education content is featured at prlabs.com. So do know that we'll make it a little bit more visible when you're logged in the very near future. But for the time being, I would just really encourage you to log in to prlabs.com and then go to your account dashboard, which if you scroll down on the left side, you will find the education and webinars tab that you can review all of my content from this year. And we've had some wonderful guests this year, which again, I would love to welcome you onto the show here. And then Esther Esther Zavala, it's great to see you here. Esther asked the questions on perhaps maybe some products to evaluate or support around gout. And so, keep in mind when we're looking at gout, a lot of times we're looking at the renal system, we're looking at the urinary system. We're also perhaps looking at the microbiome too, as to how it's actually managing aspects to, keep in mind that there could be potential mismanagement of like oxalates and other derivatives that could contribute to gout and allow for uric acid buildup, right? And so I really do like to look at Renovin. Urivin's another great product. Looking at microbiome management as well. Those are all great aspects to support kind of a recorrection there. So I would kind of understand where their weakest link is and then maybe make recommendations in that sense. And then we had an anonymous attendee actually ask the question, Renovin and Hisonol kind of being a great pairing to support effective, like why does that work so well for the kidneys? And I guess the theory in a lot of ways with Hisonol, right, Hyssop is, it really is kind of an immune activation. It's been used for centuries to kind of clear stagnation within the lungs, but that also kind of tangentially works energetically to really support fluidity in all systems, right? And especially from an immune perspective, I would kind of theorize that that's where it's working energetically through the body. And so when you have kind of renal stagnation and ineffective renal clearance, incorporating immune modulators may be beneficial. And it may not just be Hisonol. You may want to evaluate, for example, our allocidin product. You may want to look at aspects of how we're supporting the lymph, right? Castor oil packs, right? So all those different add-ons that really create additional fluidity in the body, but don't cause like the removal of minerals or maybe accelerate detoxification, but work to maybe support the fluid composition of key substrates, right, in the body. That might be why, right? So I would propose that, but what I would love to do, if you would like to email me, or I'll actually research that and I'd love to share on our next content piece. So tune in next time and I'd love to share that with you. And let's see. So Charlene actually asked about fertility and pregnancy. So Charlene Wang, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining. The question was around pregnancy and actually supporting, the kind of the environment of the individual to allow for pregnancy to occur. And so, there's a lot of different reasons why, and it's hard to say, why somebody might not be able to get pregnant. There could be emotional issues, there could be immune issues. There could be aspects related to stress, right? So I really, it's nice to kind of take in that client maybe holistically. And if I was, working with you, or, if you're working, I would like you to really want to understand environmentally what's going on. Of course, labs and hormonal markers, but something to kind of really look to understand globally what could be a driver of causing the body to not welcome pregnancy. And of course, it's really important to work perhaps with an OBGYN, but we do have products like Ultrapollen that are very gentle, that can really support the management of hormones. It may be cortisol driven, so you may be looking at supporting additionally with adaptogen, but I really do encourage, ask those questions, right, that we kind of framed at the beginning energetically, to understand from an energetic perspective where there may be an inability, and go from there. So I know that wasn't exact, but hopefully that gave you maybe some clues. And then there's a question around DHLA and alpha lipoic acid. Do know that we are still working on development of that. So for the anonymous attendee that asked that, I would love in the near future to be doing a webinar with the release of our DHLA, but we are looking to source that. So you do have a new dietary supplement for alpha lipoic acid that would be just from us. And then Tiffany, another great question here on NZ Red Velvet Deer Antler. for women, and how would that product actually maybe be beneficial other than just immunity? Well, keep in mind, a lot of times when you're actually looking at collagen synthesis in the body, there could be aspects to where poor prostaglandin management and kind of over abundance of inflammation, right, can actually cause the degradation of the collagen network. And so, not only is NZ red velvet deer antler perhaps beneficial to activate kind of that gene essence of the kidneys and really support kind of the hormonal fires perhaps for intimacy and desire and sexual arousal, but there is the aspect where, if somebody's looking to support kind of that beauty from within, our NZ red velvet deer antler could be a product paired with vitamin C, our collagen premier, that may help to support a more healthy formation of that collagen matrix. So, kind of that youthful vitality, there's a lot of different approaches that, NZ red velvet deer antler could be used for. And so, don't just look at it as kind of like a hormonal product. There is a significant amount of natural collagen to that product, but also because of how it's going to support inflammation signaling in the body, it actually may be beneficial for the collagen matrix too. So that's a little fun fact where, you really we're using our collagen premier, using our vitamin C, even incorporating our aloe powder premier, and then of course our NZ red velvet deer antler. It's a fun premier little point to maybe use those products together. And so, and Christina, it's great to see you. Christina was actually at our QA Level 1 seminar this weekend, so it's great to see you here, Christina. And so I actually, I typically do 3 to 6, or I like to make a recommendation if around 3 to 6. Keep in mind, it's better to start very, very low. Somebody can be very, very sensitive to the ingredients or the bioactives of the NZ red velvet. So always start slow and then kind of work your way up from there. So really, really cool. And Christina wanted to just say, highly recommend. So if you are interested in coming to a QA seminar, we are going to be releasing, or even just a product seminar. I'm excited to announce that here, this will be a sneak peek. We are getting back on the road, and we are going to be doing both a product and QA seminar, hopefully in your backyard in the coming months. So be on the lookout for a special announcement around QA seminars and product seminars. We have not done a product seminar I don't even actually know in the history. Dr. Marshall was always doing product seminars with QA, but we're doing a pure product seminar and then a quantum reflex analysis level 1 seminar in the same weekend. So be on the lookout for those announcements. I would love to meet you in person or see you in person in a local event in your backyard. And Chaya, it's great to see you here, or great to have another question from you. Her question was, what's the difference between the aloe powder and the pills, and when to recommend the one or the other? So the aloe powder, actually, I would preferentially recommend the aloe powder premier as much as you can. The ice mannan content from a percentage is roughly about the same, but with the aloe powder premier, it's a nice mixed berry flavor. It provides additional polyphenols and anthocyanins with the natural mixed berry flavor. So you actually get more antioxidants with that product. It's a nice, gentle flavor. It mixes really well. So it's just it tends to be more versatile. I mean, you can dose in a higher dosage with the aloe powder versus the capsules, which, yes, you can, I guess, make a comparable dose, but given that it's in pills, it may not be, it may be like 6 or 9 pills as compared to 2 scoops of the aloe powder premier. So it's just easier to dose a little bit higher, especially if you are trying to use aloe from a more clinical lens. I love aloe. It's one of my favorite things to actually consume upon waking is I do pink salt premier, I do a scoop of the aloe, and I do a little bit of our pH minerals, and it's a great way just to support hydration of the body upon waking. And of course it helps with digestive health, and hopefully it's helping with my skin, I'm not sure, but a great kind of tonic in the morning to combine those things. And you can actually put it in a smoothie or straight in water. So just know that, that product, because it's in powder, you can mix it, whether that's in a smoothie or in water. So I have done it. I do a berry smoothie, usually for breakfast. And if I didn't actually take my aloe then, I'll use it there. Maybe add our fermented beets as that's another great way, especially with berries. It all kind of mixes in and you don't taste it. And then Tiffany had the question about the NZ Red Deer Velvet Antler. I love the questions around here about the deer antler product tonight. And you can, so there either, if you're consuming the full capsule, or actually her question was, how does perhaps placing the product in hot water change the way it's used? As long as it's not boiling, scalding water, we want to kind of preserve as much of the bioactives as we can. You can put it into a tea. You can actually, open a capsule and perhaps dose it into like a bone broth, right? That's already cooked. It's a great way to increase the amount of collagen, given that the bone broth is going to be a natural source of collagen too. So keep in mind, our products are whole foods, right? We view them as whole foods. And so incorporating them into recipes, using them holistically in that manner is a great way to support versatile ways of actually consuming that, right? And especially when somebody might have pill fatigue, using them as recipe add-ons, it's a great way just to increase how much nutrition they're consuming. Do know that we're going to be releasing an additional line of spices because we're already sourcing spices, right? We do have, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, a release of our new spice line. So I'll be looking forward to featuring that with you hopefully soon, which will have cayenne. We already have ginger out. We'll have cinnamon, and I believe there might be a rosemary. Don't quote me on that. But we'll be sharing that with you. Turmeric, I think, was the other one. And you'll be able to use premier quality spices with all the recipes that you might be making. And maybe one day you'll actually see me back here and I'll have maybe a griddle or something and we'll be making recipes together. So with that all being said, I loved all the questions tonight. Thank you guys. It truly is such an honor to answer your questions and really support your knowledge. So if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out, wmarch@prlabs.com. And do know that we are doing a lunch and learn tomorrow. I will be back here with you guys live. We'll be covering LJ100, which is the Urkamaya longifolia, Tonkat Ali extract that we use for our men's performance edge, as well as our Radiant Woman and Testosterone Premium. So if you would like to learn the science of how Tonkat Ali supports hormonal health, I'll be diving into that tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So that being said, thank you so much for your stewardness of health and really supporting your clients to ideal health with premier products, and just for tuning in and hopefully learning something about Yin and Yang and hormonal duality. I'll look forward to joining you next time on one of our Premier Insights series or any of our content that we're producing here at Premier Research Labs. But stay healthy, stay radiant, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon.